As we've been saying, today's government does much, too much. They've gone way beyond the founder's plan, and here that is. It's this small. It was very limited. But one of the things that is in here is defense, protecting us and our borders from danger. That's something government is supposed to do. And with revolutions in the Middle East and scary things being done by North Korea and China, some people argue our military should do more to keep us safe and spend more. No and no, says former Navy Lieutenant Christopher Preble. He's now Director of Foreign Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. So, no, people want to kill us.
Well, first of all, the question is, John, who wants to kill us? We know about al-Qaeda. We went into Afghanistan immediately after 9/11, and I think a lot of people, me included, supported that mission. But if you look at all of the other things that our military has been doing and is doing now, it's about more than just defending the United States. It, in effect, is doing for other governments what they're supposed to do for us. You're right. The Constitution does stipulate the common defense, but not the common defense of the whole world, the common defense of us, the citizens of the United States. If you look at how much money we spend on defense,
which is about $700 billion.
About $700 billion, and then you factor in a few...
20% of the budget.
About 20% of the budget, 55% or so of the discretionary budget. Okay, just to get you a kind of get people's bearings. We are spending more in real terms today than we did at the height of the Cold War, the height of the Reagan buildup, the height of the Vietnam War, the height of the Korean War. More today than at any time during the Cold War. So the question really is, do we have more threats today? Are there more scary things out there? You mentioned I served in the Navy briefly. It's true. I served 4 years in the Navy, very proud of it. The closing days of the Cold War. And let me tell you, the big bad Soviet Navy was a lot scarier than the kinds of people we're dealing with today. We've frightened ourselves, and we've taken on the responsibility of doing for other governments what they should do for themselves.
China just increased military spending by 12.5%.
That's right, and they have been increasing military spending. As most countries, as they grow wealthier, they spend more money on defense. In the meantime, when you look at the total number of what they spend, it's about a quarter of what the United States spends. And then when you factor in the amount that our allies spend, we spend about 50% of total military spending worldwide is U.S., and then our allies account for about another 20%. So that kind of gives you a flavor. So you say our allies should pick up some of the bill. So South Korea, they're rich. Correct.
But they don't have nuclear weapons. North Korea does.
Correct. When we went into Korea and defended the South and ultimately drove the northern forces out of South Korea, the two Koreas were roughly equivalent in terms of population and economic output. Now, South Korea has 40 times the population of the North, and it's hard to even 40 times the GDP of the North, about 2.5 times the population. And you ask the question, if they are not capable now of defending themselves, when will they be?
They don't have nuclear weapons.
A lot of countries don't have nuclear weapons, and they've concluded, I think correctly, they don't really need them because nuclear weapons are useful for deterrence, but there are a lot of other aspects of deterrence that go beyond nuclear weapons, including traditional conventional arms.
Well, Afghanistan, Cato would have us just get out.
Right.
Then al-Qaeda would come back and launch another attack.
Well, first of all, we know that al-Qaeda is not in Afghanistan. They're in Pakistan.
All right,
a lot of other places. They're in Yemen.
The Taliban would take over. Women would be enslaved.
Right.
They'd attack us again.
I think we have to remember why we went into Afghanistan after 9/11. As I said, I supported that intervention, as did my colleagues. But the mission has changed very dramatically since then. We are not just hunting al-Qaeda. We are trying to build a functioning nation state in Afghanistan, which is a fool's errand. Nation building is always a fool's errand, and it's not essential to U.S. national security. We can hunt al-Qaeda and degrade their ability to carry out a future attack, and also ultimately, I think, discourage other countries, other leaders like the Taliban, from making common cause with them. I would argue we had done that in the first few months of the intervention in Afghanistan, and that mission has just allowed to creep and grow.
What you're saying is don't shortchange the troops,
right,
but cut the mission.
Right.
What do you mean?
We have to rethink the purpose of our military. Start from scratch. Start from the core function, which is to defend the United States, and expect and demand for other countries to play the primary role of defending themselves and to police their respective regions. If we were to do that, if we were to rethink that central mission and say the United States military is not the first responder for every 911 call in the world, then I think we could responsibly reduce military spending quite dramatically, actually. If you bring them back from places like Europe where they're simply not needed any longer, if you say
50,000 soldiers in Germany.
Right. Defending them from what exactly? It's not entirely clear to me.
And I'm struck by something you wrote about how the spending is on autopilot. That
yes.
Every year they give the Army, the Navy, the Air Force the same amount?
Right.
They don't even make a decision?
Right. There's a lot of inertia in government spending, and especially in military spending. What you spend is what you spent last year plus a little bit more. But in terms of the base budget, the services basically get the same shares, and that goes back decades, actually.
The last change was Eisenhower, who was a general, and maybe he had the confidence because of that, who said, I'm going to give more to the Air Force, less to the Army, because I'm worried about Russia and nuclear war.
Right. Especially coming out of the Korean War, Eisenhower said, we're not going to do that again. I'm not going to launch another land war in Asia. He was criticized by that. People like John Kennedy and other liberal Democrats said, you're giving up, you're ceding the field to the Soviets. I think ultimately Eisenhower's judgment was correct.
Well, thank you, Chris Preble. Your writings have opened my mind. I encourage you to check them out at the Cato Institute.